Connecting. So it says connecting on my side though.
Okay.
Yeah, it still says it's upcoming. Oh, we're live. Now we're live. It's funny how it waits for us to bang on to be 6 o'clock, even if you press the go live button. If it's got us booked in for 6, it keeps us on at 6. Start to slowly wait for people to start filtering in. So, Miahal, how have you been this week anyway?
Busy.
Busy. Yeah, you were, weren't you?
Busy. Yeah, I'm challenging horrible histories for the world of animated history books.
I actually met him. He's actually really nice. The writer to Horrible History, really nice guy. Like, ended up talking to him for ages, but he what was it called? It's wild because I was talking away to him, and he was describing the hotel down in Mahon, up in Blackrock, and God, you think I remember the hotel now, and I can't remember the bloody hotel, but it ends up anyway. It was the same hotel that my mother used to work in, and I was like, Jesus, that's the same time my mother used to work at, and he described the year and the date and the month and everything. And I was like, that's absolutely wild because that's around about the time my mother and dad actually met up. And I was saying that to him. And he was there trying to tell me the story about the time he was drinking there. And he ended up, he lost his shoe and everything like. And he went specifically down there because he wanted to see the Blackrock Castle in Mahon. The castle that was built to stop the pirates up around that area and stuff. It was one of Elizabeth's castles and stuff. And I was like, that's absolutely wild, you know? How you doing? How's everybody doing?
We're fine.
If you're in the comment section there, definitely tell us you can sound is grand and everything, because we're always paranoid if people can hear us or not in the old comment section. I'll just...
Thank you for reminding me.
What was it called? I'll just pop around to your challenge there to make sure everything is going live and stuff. The Bruce is quite slow tonight, actually, moving forward. I think you got 2 people popping up on your side. I think the problem is that I was expecting, as Michal was saying there, for the, what was it called? Because I attached everything up. Set it up and everything, but it never advertised itself for some reason on all the channels like it usually does. I think that's the problem though, is that nobody knows that part 2 is on. Although we did kind of say that it was going to be on today, but I don't think it advertised itself out. And last time I did a short as well. I did a short last time, which gave us good numbers, I think. I think that this time I poorly advertised everything. So lesson learned anyway.
Well, we're getting viewed from Scotland and London.
Yeah, well, that's good anyway. That's the main thing. How's everyone in the comment section doing tonight? Everybody doing well? That was another thing, Michal, I forgot to ask you as well, because you covered the thing before, and I forgot to tell you. You don't mind covering the Battle of Dysart Urdee, do you?
No, actually, I think it's quite prevalent.
Yeah.
I'll go through it, but you've got 2 important O'Briens, Donogh O'Brien and Murtagh O'Brien, and the Declares, and all happening in the same year in 1318, and it does overlap with it's actually part of another layer for the Bruce invasion, which I will happily go into. So yeah.
Yeah, because Battle of Dysart Urdee is one of those funny ones that we keep forgetting. Like, I'll go into more detail, obviously, when we get to it. But it's definitely a battle that gets easily forgotten about for sure. But anyway, I'll start up now anyway because we're a good 4 or 5 minutes in.
Yeah. Hi, Kira. You're having the same weather as us down in Kerry. The wind is bloody howling outside, and it's raining, raining, raining.
Am I getting your comments? Was that a comment on your side?
It's a comment in the chat, so my YouTube is saying that no one has watched at all.
Yeah. I see the comments there popping. I had one comment for a while there. My side isn't loading properly at all. Apologize for that one, guys. And we'll have to keep an eye, actually. Let me fly over and set up the TikTok one as well, because I have to keep an eye on Mihal's one as well. That's one that suddenly explosive as well.
Did we ever figure out how to link the chat to?
No, I haven't, because I literally just got this yesterday up and going again. Because do you remember I had disagreement with Restream, this one, well, the multi-stream anyway, and I only got it back yesterday, and so I haven't had time to set up anything. Because originally as well, what I wanted to do was actually myself and Owen organize our TikToks. So we get the TikTok up and going as well on our side, not just for yourself, Mihal, but also for myself and Owen's TikTok as well. Like, so we'll try to actually have that organized for the 8th for when Dr. Militia Shields is on for her, because she wants to cover clothing in the 16th century to do with the Gaelic and the Anglo-Irish, because a lot of people, like anytime you talk about medieval Irish clothing, a lot of people always turn to clothing from the 16th century. And I think it's because, well, obviously Dr. Owen O'Neill can correct me there on this one, but I think it's because it's well documented by the Tudors and also by a few European artists as well. I think that's probably why.
Well, at the end of the 16th, early 17th century, you have that famous set of clothing that they found in a bog, I think in Derry. Which is, if you actually look at it, it's a mix of stuff, and there are a lot of drawings, some of which you have to be careful with, like Dura's drawings you have to be careful with, because he never came here. And if you look at some of the stuff, like the weapons that he portrays, some of them are common European weapons, and people, I know some reenactors, they go all looking at the weapons that Dura draws, whereas they're not specifically Irish. But like, for example, the mantles, the Irish were exporting mantles. It's funny, like Gaelic Ireland was exporting in the 16th century mantles and various types of hawks for and falcons for, what do they call it? Falcon. When you have the bird, the hawk on your.
That's it, falconing.
Falconing, yeah. That was a big export. A lot, and those big mantles were very popular in I think in France and parts of Germany. Sort of Ireland's 16th century fashion industry.
I never watched it, but I've seen someone, a TikTok or a YouTube or like a to watch a video, and the Irish mantle was one of the reasons for the Tudor conquest they were claiming, and I meant to pin it to watch it because it was so I don't know if that claim was just like clickbait or but I thought it was an interesting topic that I wanted to go through, but I've totally lost the video, so I don't know where it is. If anyone can put a link.
I would not put that in the top 10 reasons why England conquered Ireland, or at least especially in the Tudor period. Because there were, if you look at the various state documents, sometimes in the 9 Years' War, some officials are saying, look, the soldiers who come here, they're dying, they're freezing, they're suffering. Shouldn't we give them Irish mantles, because the Irish use them and are fine? And like London and Whitehall, no way, we can't dress our boys who we don't care about and don't want to spend money on. We can't let them put on Irish clothing.
Insanity. Absolutely insanity. I don't know what the hell got into them in the I think it's from the Statutes of Kilkenny onwards in 1366, where they just start to see conquest through clothing. What the hell,
But
Yeah.
there's a very interesting painting. It's by a famous painter, someone the younger, who painted a lot in the Elizabethan and Henry VIII's court. It's done in the late 1590s. He's an English guy, whose name I can't remember now. He was a bit of a mad guy, so he had loads of feuds with the later Kildare people. He was the general of Kern, or captain of Kern, for Elizabeth. He was very close to Essex, and he essentially went back to England with Essex and did some mad uprising by himself and got executed. But there's a painting of him dressed in supposedly Gaelic clothing. And I just can't remember his name.
Yes,
General
I know
Lee.
exactly.
Lee.
Yeah.
That's it. Thomas Lee. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a famous picture. So, and there are various other ones about clothing. So there's loads of people coming in now.
Yeah.
Says
I think is the video
there
still on?
There were 9 watching on my side, and then it went down to 4. So I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, it's quite funny right now. All right.
I did a video on Thomas Lee on your channel, Philip, a few years ago. Is this
we've had a. Yeah. I'm sure it was this one, but when the channel first was trying to get back on its feet again.
After you had your tantrum.
What was it called? It's tantrum, and then there's YouTube stealing money from me. Big difference there. What was it called? What was I bloody saying again? But Thomas Lee's a funny character, all right. Can't remember the bloody hell I was saying before you brought up the bloody money again.
We were talking about clothing. Clothing.
What was it called? Interesting topic, all right. Wished Irish people would still use the Brat Irish cloak. It is the closest one that people are wearing these days is definitely the Galway shawl. A Galway shawl, for some magical reason, is the only thing that's surviving when it comes down to Irish cloaks and stuff. Which you're right about that. Ireland used to have a massive history when it comes down to cloaks and stuff. It's interesting that even from the Scottish side of things, which survives historically is the kilt. Eventually, from the Scottish branches of cloaks, it eventually becomes the great kilt from the Scottish interpretation of things, and then from the great kilt then going into the 19th century, they decide just to cut all of it off, except for the, as Rachel was calling it, the kilting part of it, which is where you get your cloak and then you tie it around your waist and you put the belt on it. And then the technique is called kilting, where you get the extra clothing and stuff of the cloak and you start to kilt it over the belt. And that's called kilting. And so what they did in the 19th century is they cut everything off around the waist. And what's left is only the kilt of the cloak. So that's where the kilt comes from today, which is very interesting. And then on the Irish side of things, the only thing that's left is the Galway shawl, because obviously as you evolve into the 19th century as well, on the Irish side of things, the shawl starts to become more popular for Irish women. I don't see any depictions in the 19th century of Irish men wearing any cloaks or anything.
They disappeared. Clothing changes. Just think of nowadays. Think of clothing from the 60s and 70s is, that's 50, 60 years ago. It seems so far. I think by the 1640s, even the Gaelic Irish, they would not have been wearing the same clothes as the Gaelic Irish in the 1590s or 1580s.
100%.
Things change. Change.
Even the era that we're talking about today, which is, Ireland in the 1318 with the Bruce's invasion of Ireland, because of Braveheart in particular, many people expect everybody, and I should have actually had pictures of it today. I could actually, probably while you guys are talking, chuck in a few photos of how people were actually dressing. But there is no, Celtic tartan clothing and stuff. It's just not popular in Ireland at the time. You do have two styles of clothing in Ireland at the time, which is more of the northern type of clothing, which you can see with the effigies in Iona. And then you have more of a southern clothing, which is more of a kind of European style clothing, how they were dressing in France at the time. Because the southeast of the island has more of an Anglo-Irish style going on, with the likes of people who were dominating fashion at the time, the likes of the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds and stuff. And they're very much connected into the French world at the time. So French fashion was more dominant in Ireland at the time. Then, as would be depicted in movies and stuff, this kind of tartan and kilt and stuff, it's definitely not the fashion of Ireland at the time during the Bruce's invasion. So you're definitely right there.
Should we start the main conversation?
Aye, for sure. So anyway, last time we were at this, we were in around 1318. We basically last week we covered a good chunk of the Scottish War of Independence. Micheál had done a quite good introduction into that, covering the fact that the war was fought between Edward I when he invaded into Scotland, and ultimately went against the likes of Robert the Bruce. And for there, the two of them fought for years. Robert the Bruce couldn't beat Edward I in open field warfare, and eventually had to switch over to much more guerrilla warfare, burning the land around him, scorcher as it's referred to, basically destroying the resources that the English had in Scotland. And one of the allies he used during this era was the O'Neills. So he started building a very healthy relationship with the O'Neills in Ireland, because at the time the O'Neills were also fighting the English in up around both the Carrickfergus area and also down in Leinster as well. And that's what Micheál was covering last week. Another thing as well that they were covering was what we were covering last week as well was Edward the Bruce, who was looking to become king of what was it called? Ireland at the time. He had been invited over to the island around 1315, and between the O'Neills and themselves, were looking to push out the English from the island of Ireland. That's about right, lad.
Yeah. And we got as far as
1318.
The siege of Dublin. Sort of. I think we got up to the second last year.
Yeah. Just going into 1318, because we covered just when Robert the Bruce was going back to Scotland at the end of 1317, and we were just going into 1318 at that point, if I remember. Okay. Anything else you guys want to expand on, or anything else before I push ahead there?
No, but I think one question that's worthwhile discussing at the end is, could Edward the Bruce have won in Ireland? Not Edward, now, for the end. It's a good way to end.
Yeah, I think 100%. Definitely something we should definitely expand on, especially after the battle itself. 1318 is also very interesting as one as well, because we see John de Birmingham being brought over, who is a major player at this point. He's definitely somebody that starts to change the shifting of the war at the time, and becomes a very important player from this point onwards. Going into the battle itself, it was something that many military advisors on the side of Edward the Bruce, from both the Scottish side of things, because the Scots were telling him, Edward the Bruce, not to march down on Dundalk. I'm not quite sure why, and it's definitely something you guys can expand on. But why did Edward the Bruce get it into his head that he needed to march down to Dundalk. And it must have been something he was in, contact with the Scots, especially his brother, Robert the Bruce, telling him that he was planning on marching down to Dundalk and stuff. Because, when I listen to the likes of Professor Sean Duffy from Trinity University and a few other academics, they constantly point out that the Scottish advisors had told him repeatedly not to march back down to Dundalk again, to wait for support from the Scots. The Scots were sending additional support over to him. And then on the flip side of things, the likes of the O'Neills were also advising him not to march down to Dundalk because his military force wouldn't be at an advantage, that he'd be in a massive disadvantage. And as we get into the battle itself, it's definitely something that I could understand why the O'Neills were advising him the way that they were advising him. Because if you look at his military force, which was made up of spearmen, not pikemen, and that's very important to point out. From the research I have done, although there's no research, information at the time that literally says he had spearmen and not pikemen. Many academics I have listened to do point out that Edward the Bruce at this point had spearmen, which is very important. He didn't have pikemen to fight off Anglo-Irish cavalry and stuff. And that's very important to point out, which could be why the O'Neills were telling him over and over again, don't march down to Dundalk. You'll be left out in the open fields and stuff to be butchered and killed off. And he also had additional of Gallowglass as well. So the combination of Gallowglass and spearmen, absolutely amazing for closed in fighting and stuff. But when it comes down to big open fields and stuff, definitely probably wasn't for the best when it came down to Edward the Bruce, which could also indicate why people were telling him to wait for additional troops to come over from Scotland, who may have been armed with more pikes and stuff to be able to fight in the big open fields. Maybe that's why they were advising him, not just for the additional troops, but also for pikemen as well. Anything else you guys want to add on to that before we move on of why?
Yeah, that's a question you can ask about so many generals and kings and military leaders throughout history. Why did they do this? It's a question that's hard to answer because we usually ask it when something goes badly wrong and the guy gets killed. A lot of it could come down part to arrogance, sort of, I've marched through Dundalk, I've burnt Dundalk before. Part due to frustration, a lot due to lack of patience, which is, in military terms, in military history, lack of patience is a cardinal sin at certain times. And just being overconfident, refusing to listen to other people. Maybe they've given advice before that's been very cautious and you've got away with it. And then, eventually you're going to come a cropper. You roll the dice each battle, and this battle, his dice rolled badly. He should have stayed in Ulster, yes, but he only learned that by going towards Dundalk and getting killed.
I also think
him and 1,000, maybe 10,000 other generals throughout history have experienced that.
Yeah. I also think, obviously, Robert's intention to send troops were off the back of a siege of Berwick on Tweed. He's captured Berwick in April, and has the intention to send troops across to divert again a counterattack by the English on Berwick. That's speculated on. Obviously, I don't think there's actually a source that states that Robert had any intention of sending reinforcements. There's not a specific out-and-out source that states that, but I think it's heavily implied that was his next move, or it would have been the next logical move for the Bruces to consolidate again and retry. But like I say, it's considering who is it. You carry on.
It's interesting that you do bring that up about that there's no solid evidence of Robert the Bruce wanting to send troops over to Ireland, which actually may explain why Edward, suddenly was like, oh, I need to go into the attack now while I still have the opportunity to do so. Because maybe if that's the case, because you see, this is what's interesting, is that after Edward the Bruce is dead, Robert the Bruce no longer sends troops over to support O'Neill. Now, don't get me wrong, he still goes over to O'Neill here and there. But when it comes down to the rest of the campaign of the Scottish War of Independence, from that point onwards, Robert the Bruce then starts to spend most of his resources going back to the old skirmish tactics on the border, and slowly but surely burning Edward II's resources to then force him into complying, into accepting Robert the Bruce as King of Scotland, which is a tactic that works very, very well. So it's interesting that you say that, because that's actually in the realm of possibility that, although maybe that there was promise in the air of Scottish troops being sent over, maybe Edward the Bruce knew, Robert the Bruce enough to know he wasn't sending more troops over, that this was it. And, although most likely he was going to be knocked out of it and, lose, maybe that explains a lot. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, that there isn't enough evidence to prove Robert Bruce is going to send troops.
I think also, no, I couldn't find a specific date for these sources, but obviously we speculate that why would he head down to Dundalk when he has quite, notable Irish Ulster chieftains and other chieftains throughout Ireland under his employ, and have obviously paid homage to him. So they would be giving him their local knowledge and advice. So why would he make such a drastic attempt to go down to Dundalk? But I found 3 references, and again, I can't state where in the campaign these were from, but I thought it was interesting, and it may raise another layer to look into. We have the McCartans and the McQuillans. Apparently, they pay homage to Edward Bruce, but actually ambush him at Moray Pass and forcing the Earl of Moray to have to rescue Edward. And then the O'Dempseys do something very similar, is where they swear fealty during this campaign and then lead them into a trap, attempting to starve them near the River Bann. Again, these are, they don't specify where in the campaign this is happening in my initial search, but it leads me to add that extra layer that actually we don't often put into it, the amount of intrigue. We know later campaigns in Ireland were filled with misinformation that we used to dramatic effect, both for and against the Irish. But it was obviously happening, and quite, it feels like an obvious statement, but something that we always overlook is that there are other factors at play here. Maybe he is being given the wrong information for the ends of other, of other chieftains and kings and stuff. So it was a point that was well worth raising.
Another point is that for Robert, Ireland was never more than a distraction. The war is a game of using your resources as best as possible. Scotland has less resources than England. Ireland has less resources than England. Sending several thousand men into Ireland distracts the English considerably. But supplying that force properly was probably way more than Robert the Bruce could do. And in relation to intrigue, probably Robert is saying to people, "Oh, tell the English that we are about to send more men to Ireland." That works. Sort of, if the English think there's a bunch of a few thousand more Scots going to be arriving. They're going to send more men to Ireland. So that intrigue part is important. But for Robert, the main part of the war was Scotland, was winning Scottish independence, taking Berwick and getting Edward to recognize them. Ireland was never more than a sideshow.
Yeah, I definitely 100% agree on that. And I think that really expands on what Micheál was saying there as well, about the fact that there's a good chance, because there's no evidence. And I think that, Micheál, I think you really hit the nail on the head, which I didn't even look into, is the fact that there is no solid evidence that Robert the Bruce was planning on sending more resources over to support Edward the Bruce. Because, like, after this is all said and done, you know, Robert the Bruce has his excuse there to stop sending resources over to O'Neill to continue hounding the Leinster region and Carrickfergus as well. It's not until afterwards, when we go into the 100 Years' War, and still, you know, not until you're looking at 1370 and stuff, that the Stuarts are sending resources over to O'Neill to hound and wreck up Carrickfergus. And it's mostly the MacDonalds that are sending resources over to the O'Neills later on to hound and wreck up Carrickfergus, and then push into Dundalk and into Dublin. And that's 1370, almost 100 years after this entire campaign is done. So, I think that's very, very important information to highlight, Micheál. And definitely very good research being done off yourself. Definitely something I definitely would agree with. Something else as well, somebody brings up a very good point in the comment section, is the fact that, well, first off, I want to cover this one as well off Caveman as well. I always thought if Bruce could take Dublin and hold it, then expand to the other crown towns, English control on the island. It's definitely something as well that I think is very important to go on.
That is, capturing Dublin is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because if you capture Dublin, it automatically becomes your capital. And you are going to have to put resources into defending it. And if you lose it again, the other side can say, hey, we've beaten you. Warfare in Ireland was very dynamic, very mobile. There were sieges, but they weren't often successful. And then there was a lot of irregular warfare, guerrilla warfare, whatever you want to call it. And people would change sides quite frequently. It wasn't sort of the same sort of warfare as you would see, say, between France and England. The English did practice that sort of irregular warfare quite a lot. So capturing Dublin could have been a trap for the Bruce. If he got in there, he would have had to stay there and make himself king. And would he have been able to defend Dublin? What would the reaction of the other lords who may have been on the fence be? So hold on, this guy's captured Dublin. What's he going to do? Does he really want to become king? How's that going to affect me? It might have attracted some support, but it might have pushed support the other way. It's very hard to say.
Sorry about this, pressing my button there. What is very frustrating about all this is the fact that, just like Ukraine recently with that war, where the Ukrainians had successfully, time and time again, pulled off sieges, which has completely burned Russian resources, and shown to the rest of the Ukrainians that, hey, look, if you have sieges and you just drag the siege on for ages, it has massive impacts on the Russians. The same thing has happened in Ireland with the siege of Carrickfergus, where the people of Carrickfergus has shown to the rest of the Anglo-Irish and the English that, hey, look, if you just drag this on for ages, you could really affect the Scottish military. And so, people of Dublin are fully aware of this. And, the rest of the Anglo-Irish, all of the Leinster region are fully aware of this as well, that if they see the Scottish siege, the Scottish cannot hold that siege without starting to have their resources massively burned into, especially since this is a period of a very strange cold era that has called in. It's only now we're starting to realize that perhaps this was mini ice age. You have a famine going through the island of Ireland. Resources are not there for the Scottish, at this point. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be highlighted as well, is that because of the Carrickfergus siege lasting the way it did, it had a massive impact on the rest of the island of Ireland, that if you are going to go into a siege, you're going to start losing resources. And it could be, what was it called? The people who are sieging that feel like they're in the siege, not the other way around, which is definitely something that needs to be highlighted as well, I feel. Also, on top of that as well, Caveman brings in another very good point as well that I just want to highlight. Even if the Bruce did win, do you think the Irish would follow him? The likes of the O'Neills and the O'Briens, I would say, compete for kingship. I think the compete for kingship part is also very, very important to highlight as well, is that you do have, I wouldn't, maybe Micheál could say there's definitely a branch of the O'Neills that would probably rebel later on, perhaps. Not one that I know of. I know the O'Donnells after this do backstab the O'Neills and cause massive casualties to them after the Scottish War of Independence. Well after the Bruce invasion.
The O'Neills, because they were so big, were fighting with each other constantly. Like when Brian of the Battle of Down, when he got killed, there were O'Neills on the other side. And at this stage, you start having the Lordship of Tyrone is swapping. You start having the emergence of Clandeboy, the Clandeboy lordships, who are quite opposed to Tyrone. And then you have various branches. Some are more friendly to England, to the English, to the Anglo-Irish, whatever you want to call them, and some aren't. And but the question is interesting. I think it's related to what we should discuss at the end about could he have won. Like if he had established himself as king, his target would obviously be to die as king, to die in his bed if possible, and secondly to be succeeded by little Edward de Bruce, to establish an Irish de Bruce thing. If he had been successful in becoming king, and it's likely that there could have been conflicts over succession, as there were in England. Like from now on until the end of the Wars of Roses, English history is full of mad fights. Barons' War. I think even at the end of this war, there's some fight. I can't remember the name they give to it, but there would have been some sort of conflict.
Oh, for
and
sure.
Another question would have been, if Bruce has become king, what sort of king is he? Is he going to be like Edward I, Longshanks, with that big stick enforcing his rule, or is he just going to stay in Dublin and letting all the local lords be by themselves?
Yeah. Also very important.
Yes. So I just want to say that, the evidence, like Owen has already said, the evidence is already there where the O'Briens, one of the O'Briens, the Donus faction, invited Edward Bruce over with Donal O'Neill. They invited him across. But Donagh O'Brien is in a current civil war at that moment with another faction of the O'Briens, Murtagh O'Brien's faction. So both are supported by De Lacy and De Burgh factions as well. So they're puppet states effectively, or puppet factions, being their civil wars being exacerbated by these two Anglo-Norman lords who have their own interests in it as well. So you can already see the divide there. If Murtagh's faction won in this hypothetical situation, he's already got the O'Briens, who will automatically use their Brian Boru connections to legitimize their rule down. The O'Neills, there's no evidence that the O'Neills are fractured during this campaign, but the that doesn't mean that they aren't. It's just not recorded anywhere. But we can see that the wider Neil, so like you said, that the Ken O'Connell, the O'Donnells do break away. The O'Dohertys take Kenilworth territory in a show, and shortly after this campaign, the Clan Ebui, the Clan de Boy faction, like Owen said, breaks off as well shortly after this campaign. There's nothing to say these things wouldn't have happened anyway without the timeline that we were in, even if you followed another timeline. So in a hypothetical world, I still don't see any different scenarios happening. Edward would have then just found himself in the same situation the English and Anglo-Normans had found themselves in shortly afterwards, which is back to clan politics, back to local politics and different branches and all the same nonsense. It's really kind of driven Ireland mad for the last 1,000 years. So I don't think he did ever. I'll go back into this later, I suppose, with the later question, could he have won? But I don't think it would have been any better for him being High King of Ireland.
And another family that would have been interested would be the O'Connors, because they would claim, okay, Rory O'Connor was the last king, so therefore it's our right. You could also
and they're
say,
in a civil war at the time as well.
Yeah, you could also say, what about the House of Kildare and Ormond? They would have been, and the other big Anglo-Irish magnates at the time. They would have been very interested in assuming if Ireland had become independent, and there you have the Bruce. Well, let's see what happens. There would have been a long list of people of speaking various languages who would have been very happy to become the next king.
For sure. And I just want back into the comment section there. I just want to make it clear to you guys that we're not covering 1306 to 1307. We're in fact just at 1318, so we're about like a good 10 years after the main fighting of the Scottish War of Independence is over in Scotland. And now that the Bruce's invasions and stuff have moved over to Ireland, that there's another front now in Ireland to take resources out of England and have the main focus now being Ireland and stuff. So that's what's happening here. However, this whole fighting starts around 1315. Last week we covered the first part of this. This week we're covering the second part of this in the year 1318, and we're just on the Battle of Frankfurt right now, which is just off of Dundalk. Just talking about why Edward the Bruce, the brother of Robert the Bruce, who is crowned King of Ireland at this point, well, recognised by the O'Neills at least, is now marching down to the Dundalk area, although his military advisors have advised him not to march down to Dundalk. Is there anything else, before I move on to the next part there, is there anything else you guys want to expand on why Edward the Bruce decided to march down to Dundalk? Because I think Micheál pretty much hit the nail on the head when he turned around and said, and it was, I think it was a very interesting thing, because even when I was doing my research yesterday, I just thought, Edward the Bruce was a bit of a numbskull, to be honest with you. I know it sounds very bad, but I was looking at the facts and I was like, geez, why would he do such a thing? But, I think Micheál really opened up my mind there by saying the fact that, hey, look, there's no evidence that Robert the Bruce was ever going to actually send troops over to support him, which is very true, because Robert the Bruce, up to that point then, afterwards had a justified campaign that did work, which was then to focus on the borderlands of Scotland alone and burn resources out that way, which did work. That eventually did get him recognized as King of Scotland. So I think, Micheál, you've brought up a very, very good point that, Edward the Bruce,
I think at the same time,
they had to commit.
Well, I think at the same time, we also have to take a step back to what we're in the first video, especially those on it, that Edward is seen as the hot-headed, uncontrollable brother of Robert the Bruce as well. So I think, and the historian, I don't know if he's a historian, but Barber, he says he goes down to Dundalk in spite of all advice, which seems like it's still within his character to be the individual you described there as a bit hot-headed, a bit. And there's no way that there's nothing to say that both can't be true. At the same time, maybe he is a bit brash, he is hot-headed, he is maybe short-sighted, or has a goal in mind and only focused on that, regardless of what his Irish chieftain allies are giving him. At the same time, Robert is more calculated. He's probably thinking, all terms of, because Edward's death, although it said he grieved his brother's death, obviously what analyst isn't going to put that he grieved his brother's death. He's going to use that for propaganda. They killed my brother, blah blah blah. So but at the same time, Edward is a pain in Robert's backside. So all throughout the Scottish Wars of Independence. So was he happy about it too? Was it or was he just able to use that? Each time something happens, he's able to put a political spin on it, like any good politician, which kings are basically all they are. So yeah, I think both are true effectively. That at the same time that he was hot-headed, but there is no evidence that, no contemporary surviving evidence that Robert was ever going to send. Those are
sure.
important.
And also on top of that as well, very good point in the comment section. Bruce was a Lowland Scot and half Norman. He was not a Highland Scottish Gael. He had the support of the Highland through Clan Donald, who were recently king before the battle in 1263. Yeah, but at this point they were kind of playing off the idea that they were kind of Gaelic from the Scotty. There's a lot more to that.
Yeah. I think it's like this whole argument, like modern arguments about immigration and stuff, where they sort of say genetically I'm British or English or Irish or whatever. They're not culture. At the time, Edward and Robert is heavily leaning into this Gaelic links. He's really sort of emphasizing his fosterage, his mother's line, his Scotland's. He doesn't claim Highland Scotland's linked to Ireland. He claims Scotland's linked to Ireland. It's always been a thing of Scottish kings. As kings of Moray, the Fergusons could only be kings. They really claimed their Irish descent. The MacDonalds fabricated their paternal Irish lines. They did have Irish connections through maternal lines, but to legitimize their kingship of the Hebrides, to say that they're Lowland Scots when really culturally and every action, every word they say is sort of emphasizing this. I think it's a bit of shaky foundation to stand on. His main allies are the MacDonalds as well. And they're not a big fan of Lowland Scots ruling over. They're still referring to themselves at times in documents as King of the Isles. They're still very much, they have that link. But they're still willing to accept the Bruces. So, it's a bit of a shaky foundation just to sort of say he's a Lowland Scot, therefore, yada, 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 when he would never even refer to himself as that in the first place. And also, like I say, is doing all that political singing and dancing to step away from that. And you focused on me there.
Well, here it brings up the views. All right, it was Rachel brought up a very good point that if you zoom in the camera and stuff, your viewership goes up. And I did notice the views have gone up there. So your gorgeous face does work, Micheál. So
subscribe. We'll take the top off.
Another comment I just wanted to, unless Owen wants to kind of expand on that one.
I'm fine there. I think we can move on.
Happy days. Another comment I just want to, I don't want to be making this us versus the comment section, but another comment I kind of want to disagree with as well is nobody beats the Irish quite like the Irish, which is actually expanding on what Micheál was saying, which kind of sort of is true, but for this one I actually kind of want to disagree on this one, and I want to expand a little bit more later on as well, is the fact that you have to remember the Battle of Dysart Dee has just happened, and if Edward the Bruce hadn't rushed over to Dundalk to try to siege Dublin or wherever the hell he was trying to ultimately do, if he had just waited for that connection, because the thing is that they have just won down south, up around the Clare region. the likes of the O'Briens and the McCartys and all that have just won the Battle of Dysart O'Dea, which then gives them massive breathing space. And this is some of the Bruce's biggest allies down in the south. And if he had waited for that connection to get through, because for a long time it was very difficult to move troops from the O'Brien side and the McCarthy side over to the region up around the Leinster region and stuff, around Meath and all that. But however, after the Battle of Dysart O'Dea, and you have that large amount of territory being taken away from the De Clare family, I definitely think that could have given them much more breathing space to be able to move troops over to support the Bruce. So I don't think it's entirely a thing of, nobody beats the Irish quite like the Irish. I do think at this point there could have been much more of a rally call from the Irish, especially after the Battle of Dysart O'Dea. But we'll expand into that, especially with Micheál in a bit, because Micheál has done a ton of research into that. Yeah. Sorry, Owen.
No one beats the Irish quite like the Irish. You can apply that to every European country at the time.
Yeah,
I was just checking now. Bruce is getting killed, and Edward is fighting with his barons. There's even a treaty in 1318 between them, which works for 3 years, and then it breaks down. And go to France, go to Burgundy, go to the Low Countries, you'll find the same repetition. I know that Barbara Tuchman, she's a journalist but wrote a lot of history books. She wrote a book, I think, was it called The Mad 14th Century or The Stupid 14th Century, where she kind of shows that all these knights and kings are constantly making idiots of themselves, and not only getting themselves killed, but getting armies massacred. And there's dynasties are getting churned over because their leaders are essentially stupid and getting into conflicts with everybody else, like their own barons, their own countrymen. So it's you find it all over Europe, this infighting.
100% for sure. Like even during the Norman invasion of Ireland, during that period, England gets into three civil wars with itself, where Henry II, like the reason why Henry II is barely even in Ireland for a few months during the summer of 1172 is the fact he has to rush home to prevent the papacy from causing another civil war in his own island. And during this as well, while the Normans are expanding the Cambro-Normans and the Anglo-Normans are expanding in Ireland independently from Henry II in many ways. Henry II is both trying to fight civil wars in France against his own barons that are meant to be loyal to him, but also he ends up fighting his own sons as well, the likes of Prince Henry, what's called Richard I, and then eventually his own favorite son, Prince John, the horrible evil one, even turns against him at one point as well, to his own depression. So, like as you pointed out there, civil war after civil war.
I've got to ask: did any of you come across? It just popped into my head. I meant to check in on it, but I never got round to it. That apparently I saw a thing I needed to research that Robert the Bruce wasn't. So the Pope was trying to end the conflict between England and Scotland. But Robert was refusing to open the letters because they weren't addressing him as king. I saw that somewhere. And now I don't know if that's true or not, but did any of you come across anything like that?
I think I came across it, but I don't know how true that is. That could have been history that was written after Scotland went Protestant. Sort of where they rewrite history and they make the Pope into a bad guy. I say he was a good guy, but he wasn't always a demon. And it could have been that he did that like for show, but I'm sure they would open the letters anyway, so that someone else would open them.
And the problem I have as well is stories like that as well in Ireland. A lot of them I come across and I'm like, God, where's this information come from? And then I find the source of it and it's just a local tour guide in the area. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know?
Or else it was invented in the 19th century.
Yeah. for sure. Because there's a ton of stuff that I had with this battle, and I tried to find the research of it, especially yesterday and stuff. And I was there looking. And eventually the answer was, oh, it was a tour guide in Dundalk that came up with it about 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, right, that makes sense. That's why I heard of it. What's it called? I push on there. Actually, what I'll do is I'll swing over to the 2 slides I added in there. Just quickly have a quick look over to the comment section there.
Are we heading to the Battle of Dais Ardina? I can't remember where we were in the.
No, I just want to focus on the main battle itself first before I jump over to Dais Ardee. What happened just going into the battle as they're moving down to Dundalk? If you just go north of Dundalk, you have these hills up here. So eventually what Edward the Bruce does is, against his advisors, both his O'Neill advisors and his Scottish advisors as well, which the Scottish advisors were advising him to wait for reinforcements to come over from Scotland, and then his O'Neill advisors were telling him that he would be in a massive military disadvantage if he went down south, that he should just wait up in the north and stuff, because that's how his military would be at its peak. When he does get down to the Dundalk area, he originally, his military force with his O'Neill advisors and stuff, wanted to keep him up to this hill, which has at the time, a very narrow path, right? Which to me makes perfect sense. And the likes of Professor Sean Duffy and various other military historians have looked at this, and they have said, which makes sense to the military force at this specific point in time in 1318 for the Bruce's military force, because of the fact his force is made up of Gallowglass, which have Dane axes, and which are the 2-handed axes, and they're made up of Scottish spearmen, right? I haven't come across any evidence to highlight that they had Scottish pike, as in the spearmen had pikes on them, right? And I think that's crucially important to why the O'Neills were advising him not to move from this position, right? To stay on this position, do not move down south. And they told him multiple times to not do that, because, from my understanding, they were not equipped with pikes, right? If they were equipped with pikes, they were able to take on a nice, formation in the open playing fields, right? However, Edward the Bruce went against that advice and advanced forward up to, as historical military advisors have pointed out, he most likely advanced down to where the original Norman Moat Bailey is, right? So just across the way there is the graveyard there, where allegedly the Bruce's body is today, up in the Frankfurt region. And this being Frankfurt, Moat Bailey. Allegedly, at this point, by the way, this is no longer a Moat Bailey castle. This is just in what's left is, there's no wooden castle at this point in 1318. It's just basically a hill where allegedly Edward the Bruce himself had positioned himself with his Gallowglass and spearmen into 3 lines, okay? Not 3 lines, 3 formations. So 3 formations, advance forward of around, his ultimate force is about 2,000 men. However, the ones that advance forward are about 300 men, allegedly. But we know this because ultimately only 80 men of the 2,000 that had advanced forward were killed, okay? The reason why it quickly fell apart is as Edward the Bruce is going against his military advisors and going in through files of tree, it makes it insanely easy for when the Anglo-Irish advance forward to fight Edward the Bruce, is what they do. It was John the Birmingham who takes full advantage of this, and what he does is he sends his Irish kerns forward, and they basically end up holding the line. They hold Edward the Bruce's formation in line, and then what happens is the Anglo-Irish themselves John de Burgh's cavalry goes around and then smashes into the line of Edward the Bruce, completely smashing up his spear and gallowglass formation, and then allows the Kerns to circle around very, very quickly and take apart what was it called? The first formation. As the second, now they're in 3 formations. As the second formation comes up, they're not in enough space to be able to support the first formation, which is quickly being circled around and chopped up by John de Burgh's Kerns. They chop them up very, very quickly. The second formation comes up. The exact same thing happens again, allegedly, where John de Burgh is able to flank around, smash into that line again, once again, allegedly able to circle around and chop them up. And again, another formation comes up, allegedly gets smashed up again. And between the jigs and the reels, Edward the Bruce is killed during that battle. Absolute insanity. Is there anything you guys want to expand on with that one?
Yeah, one thing is, where is Fort or Foggart, or I never know how to pronounce it. In 1600, when Mountjoy was about to try and fight his way through the Moray Pass, his base was Fort Hill. So it's right below, it's on the edge of the Moray Pass, which is the main route from Leinster into Ulster. But it's not the only one.
Yeah.
Okay, there's lots of forests, etc. It's not that many roads. A longer way around would have been better for him, like to, say, go through Monaghan or another part of Armagh to avoid the Moray Pass. It's obvious that there would have been the Birmingham's army. They would have been expecting to fight there. So if you he could easily have, using a bit of intelligence, send a decoy force to the Moray Pass, and he circles around behind, and he either surprises them, defeats them, or gets behind them and advances further. Like, again, it comes to the question of why Dundalk. If you want to get to Dundalk, you go down that way. If you want to break out of Ulster into Leinster, there's other ways to do it. And he went through, like, the best way for the Birmingham. He couldn't have, like, it's almost as if, like, someone on Birmingham's side was convincing him what to do to make things good for the Anglo-Irish force.
Oh, definitely. What was it called? What was it called? What was it? John de Birmingham. At this point, he's very much in the clique of the O'Reillys and the McMahons. They were his Kerns at that point, and it's eventually one of his demises. He ends up getting killed by the English and the Anglo-Irish because they get really pissed off with him. They're drinking one time, and what eventually happens is they end up chopping up Birmingham because of the fact he was so close to the Kerns and stuff. So he had absolutely magnificent advisors and stuff.
Matt just asked a question. Lots of forests and swamps, which is why I believe no armies went through Monaghan and Cavan. Yet in 1594, that's where the Battle of Clontibret was. There were paths through. There were journeys. You could get from Monaghan to Dungannon. You could get from Monaghan to Carrickfergus if you wanted. There were paths around. Yes, there were forests, but there were large areas where forests had been cleared and the Gaelic Irish were growing crops. So swamps, there were bogs, but not in that area, like Monaghan is Drumlands. There's not that many. There's lots of little bogs, but there would have been he had the O'Neills on his side. They would have brought him through that way if he wanted to.
Yeah, I just, even the way that, because I was looking back at my sources again, which is the Scottish sources, one from the Lancasterian Chronicles as well, and on top of that as well, we have the Annals of Clonmacnoise highlight the fact that, and it's insanity, how Edward the Bruce had neatly information sent out his military force perfectly wrapped up and easy to pin down by John de Birmingham's Irish Kerns. They literally pinned them in place and allowed John de Birmingham to be able to smash through with his cavalry flanks, which is complete insanity. And the fact that they had perfect spacing to not be able to support his first and second formations against the Kerns as they quickly disemboweled his formations and stuff, that they weren't able to run up and then support is just crazy, to be honest with you. I don't know what the hell was going on there. And also, I just want to head over to the comment section once again. Obviously, guys, if you have any questions on the battlefield, on the battle itself, definitely just keep plowing away there, and we'll go through the comments and stuff. Are they using Tarja shields at this time? No, that shield is used in the 16th century, and it's actually brought in from the Iberian Peninsula. They started using that shield in the Iberian Peninsula, and I think if I was, oh God, who's the historian that covered that again? It's literally on my head right now. He's actually a famous artist as well. Sean, second name is complete. I actually apologize about that one, but his name now is out of my head, so I apologize to him because he's actually the one that told me this one as well, and it's actually in his book as well on the Gallo glass. But it actually was a Iberian Peninsula, Spanish influence into Ireland, and then obviously the Irish had made their own, and the Scottish had made their own version of that. Maybe Dr. Owen O'Neill remembers the source of it, but anyway, I can't remember right now. But regardless, at this specific time, if we look at the effigies both in Iona and in Ireland, and also if we look at the Scottish chronicles as well, we know that the Irish, the Scottish, and the English at this point in this specific battle are using the Heather shield. The Heather shield being that classic knightly shield that you pretty much see everywhere. So in this specific battle, the Kerns, the Kerns, the Gallo glass, and the Anglo-Irish, and also on top of that as well, the English are using the Heather shield at this point. So that's pretty much the Kerns, the Knights, the Gallo glass, and the Scottish pikemen are all using, Scottish spearmen are all using the Heather shield, okay? Anything else you guys want to answer in the comment section or want to expand on as well?
I'll probably just... I wouldn't be Clans of Dynasties if I didn't just mention some of the people who were fighting at the battle that we sort of have from some of the sources. Actually, it's Sir Richard Latute, who's credited in some sources with killing Edward Bruce, and there's another one, Mapa, who is found. He initially sees Edward's position and charges it, and then later on they find his body over. Or underneath Edwards or something, so they're close by. So there's the Verdons, Triptons, Suttons, Cusacks, Latutes. They're all the knights who are commanders on against Edward Bruce on John de Birmingham's side. As for Edward Bruce's, not really many sources said. Most sources just say many other chiefs of Scotland, but obviously the McRorys and the MacDonalds are quoted as their chieftains dying in the battle, along with many Irish chieftains as well. But again, they're not really named as much as the English sources. I don't know, maybe we're just a little bit more shy about putting our dead on when we lose.
Yeah, perhaps. Especially with there's so much usurping going on.
Yeah, so they're the primate of the Archbishop of Armagh is also said to have been in the Anglo-Irish forces in some sources. But I've seen that as well. Yeah, and I couldn't get a verification on that. I didn't look into it, but I thought it was very interesting that he's repeatedly reportedly giving blessings and then potentially leading a body of horse as well, which is very in line with Norman clergy. But it was just an interesting tidbit that I saw, which nothing like being charged by the Archbishop.
The Archbishop of Armagh usually didn't hang around Armagh. Because there was a division in the Irish Church, in the Catholic Church, between the Irish and the Anglo-Irish, and like since the Archbishop of Armagh was the head of the church, he was a royal appointee. He would have hung about either in Dublin or Dundalk. He would rarely go to Armagh, and then the some Gaelic priests would run the church, the cathedral in Armagh. It was like so. It would be quite usual for the archbishop to be a very someone supporting the king, because the king didn't want the head of the Irish church doing naughty things. He had enough trouble.
So is it possible then, because if he's come from the Birmingham's coming from the Dundalk side, if he's around Dundalk and he's Birmingham's leading the Royal Army, it's possible then he was part of.
It's very possible that he was with the Royal Army. Whether he and it's very likely that he did give blessings. Whether he got involved in the fighting, I really don't know.
Like I said, it's not really outside the realm of Norman clergies. You know, there's many Norman clergies were second, third sons that would have received some military training. So I mean that's interesting.
It's hard to tell because the battle is over very, very quickly because Edward the Bruce had messed up very, very early on. Actually, something I did actually forget, which the comment section has brought up again, is the Gaelic javelins and stuff. Actually reminded me one of the reasons why Edward the Bruce did actually advance forward was the fact as they were holding the hill. If we go back to the hill here, they were being fired at between John de Birmingham's kerns were going up and hitting them with javelins, and on top of it as well, John de Birmingham also had longbowmen which were hitting them as well as they were positioned on the hill. So some people speculate that's perhaps why Edward the Bruce had advanced forward down the hill. Other people just point out that his plan was always to go down to Dundalk anyway, just to plow through the Anglo-Irish lines regardless, and not really care what the consequences would have been, and as Miel has pointed out a few times, Edward the Bruce is quite hot-headed. Once he's got something into his head, he's going to push down regardless. But that's an interesting point as well, is perhaps maybe that's why Edward the Bruce had advanced forward. It wasn't the fact that he wasn't completely tick-headed to go down to Dundalk. It was the fact that he was pressured into it because of the constant hail of javelins and firing from the longbows that took him away from the hill and down out into the open plains of this area here.
I just, again, another layer for me is like knowing that the opposing forces, the Toots, the Verdons, etc., all those families, the Cushacks, all those families are major landholding families in Louth, Meath, Westmeath, and some lands in Wexford. But he's literally heading right into their heartland. He's literally heading to. So I just feel like that's another opposing wall in your idea making, your planning. Like literally the Royal Army is being raised by knights from Meath, so it's like that's so you're going to be coming, because they're starving at the time. Remember, we've discussed it before, that Edward's army's ragtag, it's starving, it's not going through a great time with them. It's not receiving a lot of support from the native Irish. Because they have done a terrible job of winning hearts and minds. So whether this is a last-ditch attempt that he needs to head down, take Dublin to have that symbolic win, or maybe there's supplies down there that maybe they're after the royal supplies. I don't know, but it just seems like another weird idea.
Maybe he was hoping to plunder. They didn't use the word pale den, but that's where he into the March lordships into Meath, like where is good land, and despite problems with supply, with famine, if they had raided there, they could have got a lot of supplies, but you'd still say you can do that, but you don't have to march straight through the Moray Pass and straight into the army. You can use your ability to spread out, like the Gaelic forces moved about. Like you'll see fights between the O'Connors. They can go inland fairly quickly. The O'Neills can go into Tyrconnell, or they can go up to Carrickfergus, or down to the Midlands. You had a lot of space there. Yes, there were forests. Yes, it was inland, but with a bit of intelligence and a bit of thinking outside the box, you can move your army fairly quickly and surprise the guys.
Yeah,
as opposed to walking straight into your enemy.
Definitely agree with that one as well. It's a very strange situation for sure. Another thing people kept highlighting as well in the comment section is the boggy terrain in Ireland. The terrain does have a huge part in this. I've actually stood in the battlefield around this whole area as well, and it's very uneven. I know the O'Neills and stuff were looking for the Bruce to take even more advantage of that, to be honest with you. And this is why a lot of historians, as you were saying there, Owen, as well, is the fact that they can't really, like, when it comes down to where did this battle take place, exactly where the skirmish was. I know people are calling it a battle, but ultimately, and one side has 2,000 men, and the Anglo-Irish side allegedly, and I do kind of disagree with this, allegedly has a force of 20,000 men, which I'm very skeptical about the raising of a force of 20,000 men, given what was going on at the time, and I don't see any evidence of that much resources putting in for 20,000. No, I am. Don't get me wrong. At the same time, I know somebody will quote of Kearns and Gallowglass, and if you hit all the right buttons in Ireland, there is the possibility of raising, because we have so many cattle raiders in Ireland in around, and this is highlighting the 15th century now. This is not the early 14th century, but in the late 15th century, because of the amount of cattle raiders that were in Ireland at the time, you can raise a force of 30,000 men, okay? Now, the thing is that this is the early 14th century, and I haven't seen, resources being dipped into Ireland to pull out 30,000 men, especially when a good chunk of Ireland is fighting on the other direction. So I don't think it's possible, to raise a force of 20,000 men, especially when I've never seen anyone raise a force of 20,000 men of Irish forces in Ireland at the time. Mostly Ireland raises a force of 8,000. That's give or take around the maximum I've ever seen in Ireland. Have you guys seen any higher, Michal and Owen, in Ireland?
The numbers in this period until the 18th century are wrong. People just kind of invent nice big numbers. Elizabeth struggled at the height of the 9 Years' War with anywhere between 12 and 14,000 men. And she struggled to pay that army, to supply that army, to give clothes to that army, to feed that army. And it disappeared into Ireland, and loads of them died very quickly. Yep. There was no way there were 20,000 men. It's the same, any battle. Look at the figures. Go back to Roman history, and you'll see 80,000 here. Vercingetorix had 100,000. You can't take those as reliable at all. Like 20,000 men, trying to fit 20,000 men around there, it would, if in a column, 20,000 men would go on for a couple of kilometers. There's just no space, and the amount of food you'd need for an army of 20,000 men. Yeah. You'd probably need 1,000 people looking after food and cooking for them, etc. It's impossible in that sort of way. That doesn't mean that there could have been 5,000. Just have to be. All we know is that the Anglo-Irish army was bigger.
Yeah,
probably substantially bigger.
Yeah. On top of that as well, if you're going up to if somebody pulls out the figure of Edward III, who had a force of around, I think it was around 40,000 in France. The thing is that, English historians can support that. And you have to remember Edward III had scammed the Italian banks. He scammed them out of all their money, which allowed him to raise a mercenary force inside of France. And that's how he was able to raise. And we have figures, what's it called? We have the figures for the money he'd scammed out of the Italian banks. We have figures to show how he was supplying his military force in France. And we know of the movement of levies inside of England, moving from England into France as well. So you can support that argument, and that's how English historians are able to support that argument, and academics as well. However, for this force of 20,000 men, like, where the hell is all the resources, the money coming from? I don't see any evidence to prove that John de Birmingham is also scamming the Italian banks as well. Like, where the hell, as you point out there as well, how is he supporting this financially? Where's the resources to feed these men? Which is also what the comment section is highlighting as well. They're asking how John de Birmingham is supporting the military, which is also very, very important as well, is how John de Birmingham is supporting his military force. Now, from my understanding, Dundalk is not that far away, and Dundalk is a port, from my understanding, so it's able to get resources from both Bristol and from Dublin and from the Isle of Man very quickly into the Dundalk region, and then from there to the battlefield.
Mr. Researcher asks an interesting question there.
Caveman does as well. Sorry.
What were the resources the English were taking from Ireland if Bruce was trying to exhaust England economically?
That's also a really important one.
You have to invert that. Bruce wants the English to burn up their resources. So England at this stage they weren't obtaining money or stuff from Ireland. Ireland cost them money until the 18th century. But a lot of English people, got land in Ireland. What Bruce wanted was to get the English to send men, to send resources, to spend money in Ireland. So every man that they sent to Ireland, every pound that they spent in Ireland, meant it's less that could be spent fighting him. So it was getting the English to send resources to westward, to Ireland, not stopping the English from getting resources out of Ireland. And even food. There was famine in Ireland, so along with, no doubt, Birmingham brought food, and there were a lot of ships carrying food to Ireland at that stage. All of that meant it couldn't be used fighting Robert the Bruce in Scotland.
For sure. And I just want to answer this question as well in the comment section as well for myself. Also, another very interesting point when it comes down to going barefoot is you have to remember this is before 1920. In 1920, we bring out rubber soles onto the shoes, which makes it less slippery. Remembering that a good chunk of the terrain, not just in Ireland, is very slippery in the mud when running around, but also, funny enough, in France as well, we have accounts of English longbowmen taking off their shoes, which would have been leather shoes, leather soles as well, which would have been very, very slippery when running around the muddy, slippery hills. Okay, so we have accounts when crossing rivers, when going into boggy lands in France, and also running up, muddy hills as well in France as well, of English longbowmen taking off their shoes, so that way they can grip the ground much more easier. So it's not just kerns, by the way, taking off their shoes so they can run around, skirmish and ambush much more easier. We also have accounts of English longbowmen taking off their shoes as well, tying it around their kit, and then running around the battlefield to get to where they need to instantly to hit those shots in from uphill, and then be able to run downhill without slipping and falling, and being able to skirmish and attack with their buckler and buckler and sword, or buckler and axe. So it's not just the Irish Kerns doing it. We also have accounts of English longbowmen doing the same thing as well, just so they wouldn't slip and fall.
I want to answer the Irish Hobbler one by Caveman.
I seen that one. Just let me fly down and I'll highlight yourself there as well.
Just before you do, fair play to anybody who's the last question he mentioned about running through bogs. Fair play to anyone who can run through a bog. But the problem is you can't run. Even if you take off your shoes, you go into a bog, you're not going to run. If you run, you're going to fall on your face.
Yeah.
Never mind a bog, just a wet field. I've lost many a biking shoe in there.
But this is also really important because that's how the Battle of Agincourt was lost by the French, is that you have the English who just before they got into heavy fighting, who ran across the boggy lands, giving them, I say quote unquote run, wrestled through the boggy lands, put their pikes down, the stakes down. And yet the French, once fighting had started and the French had ran directly at the English, a lot of them had fallen over into the boggy field and stuff, and then, ended up drowning in the boggy mud. So that's also very, very important to highlight. When it comes down to these battles and stuff, that they are won and lost because of them trying to wrestle and run through the boggy land. Michal, you want to answer this one, is it?
Yeah, it's just obviously, they are obviously found in France, but just with the topic that we're doing today, the first reference actually of the use outside of Ireland is in 1296 with Edward I. He's actually really fond of the Irish Hobbler. And just to give you like an idea, the Hobbler, they're like able to traverse like hostile environments. They're not heavy cavalry. They've got a padded jacket, mail shirt, helmet, sword, long knife, lance. But unlike heavy cavalry, they are riding unarmored horses, so they're relying on speed and agility, and they're mostly used for reconnaissance, espionage, than most other things. But in 1296 they first mentioned, and it's the Battle of Dunbar that they sort of have this like underrated role, because the English chronicles actually describe the Irish as like flanking the rear and then pursuing the Scots into the mountains. But they have the most, although they appear in France, and Montserrat, the historian, writes an account of the Irish, and I believe the Hobblers get a mention in that too. But they spent most of the 13th and 14th century fighting the Scots. There was up to 1,000 at one point in service for the English army in Scotland, but Edward I normally recruited them in batches of 300, although I think nearly 1,000 made their way to France as well. So yes, they are famed for the 14th century. They are well recorded.
Yeah, because I do know Edward III, when it comes down to the 100 Years' War, absolutely loved them because they worked so well with the English longbowmen, where he would obviously start up the battle and stuff, but he would send the hobblers over to wreck up the in the distance. He would have them attack the French wagons. He would have them attack local French villages just before the battle would start, so he could send away. The French were forced to go off and protect wagons, to protect villages and stuff, because it undermined the French themselves, which was really handy for Edward III. So the Irish Hobblers were insanely effective, and Edward III absolutely loved them for sure because of how effective they were in France.
Another point about them is they probably wouldn't have used stirrups. So that means that if you are riding a horse without stirrups and you are using a spear and you try and you use it like a lance, you're going to fall off your horse. You can't absorb shock. Stirrups absorb shock. But the advantage is if you fall off your horse, and these horses were normally quite small, you can jump back on it fairly quickly.
Oh yeah, for sure. But somebody else in the comment section says, "Oh, you're talking about that show where the girl goes back into the past." That would be Outlander, isn't it? But that's set during the.
Braveheart, is it not?
What's this?
Is it not Braveheart?
No. Someone else said Braveheart as well, which actually is in the period.
Outlander is 1745.
Yeah.
It's a horrible show. And then the American War of Independence, or whatever they call it these days.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Researcher, no mention of the famine 1315, 1317. Check out part 1. They got mentioned plenty.
We actually talk about that a wee bit more just in the aftermath of the battle and stuff, because I don't we're actually just slowly, because I've gone through the battle itself. Just a spoiler, Edward the Bruce ends up getting chopped up during the formation and stuff, which the moment Edward the Bruce is chopped up, that's pretty much the end of the battle and stuff. I think someone up in the hill anyway decides, he's looking down at this disaster, and someone in the hill decides, okay, instead of continuing to send more and more people to their death, we'll just turn around to go home, back up to the north. And that pretty much brings an end to the battle itself. And poor Edward the Bruce, John de Birmingham has his corpse. And this goes back to what a tour guide said, and also what historians and academics are arguing about is allegedly John de Birmingham had brought it down to Frankfurt graveyard, and that's where they started to allegedly disembowel his body, cutting off his head, arms, and legs. His head was it London they sent his head off to, wasn't it? Or was it Dublin? Edward the Bruce's head. I think it was they sent off to Edward II in London was where his head got sent off to, and then his arms and legs were sent off to the other Irish kings as a warning not to rebel against the English monarchy. That's my understanding. And then allegedly his torso, and then some historians completely disagree with this as well, but allegedly his torso is buried here in Frankfurt graveyard, and that's his the little stone you have today to indicate where his torso is buried, allegedly. Anything else you guys want to expand on that one, or?
I just want to say where was he? Someone Jackson. I'm a Scottish historian. He's talking nonsense about the Scottish. We love you challenging us, but please elaborate more on what bit's rubbish, and if you disagree with anything said, please provide us a source so we can read it and challenge it ourselves. So because it's we've talked a lot about, actually very little about Scottish history in general, so I'm a bit confused as to what.
Yeah, I always find it funny as well, because sometimes I look at the comment section and stuff with the shorts and the videos and stuff, and then somebody's just like, I disagree with you. And I'm like, okay, so what do you disagree with? And what's your sources? And none back. It's just like, I disagree with you. Oh, okay. Fair enough.
There's two comments I want to comment on. First of all, a caveman is asking questions or making a point about Taoiseach, vassalage in Ireland, etc. I don't. He has a partial point. I don't want to answer it now, but because it's something very detailed. But I think it's something we could go into in the future.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
It's misunderstood. It's a good point. It's a good question, but the answer has to be very, very detailed. And secondly, Aaron 1 is asking about Rory Maguire, the fellow who burnt down the castles around the country. There were several Maguires over time. I'm not sure which one he's talking about, because many castles got burnt down in between 1200 and 1700, and many different Maguires burnt them down. So I'm not sure which Maguire they're referring to. If they want to,
there's a couple of famous Rory Maguire. Well, you got Rory of the Hospitality, who's about 30 years after the battle. So he's mid 14th century. So he's not really involved in this topic. And the only other one I can think of is Captain Rory Maguire from the 17th century. So I wouldn't know again. a bit clearer, maybe, and then we can sort of maybe pick our brains.
Mm-hmm.
The one who's buried in the lake in County Cavan, but the Maguire, I don't know any Maguires buried in Cavan. The Maguires are from Fermanagh.
I mean, they own parts of Northern Cavan at times, but I'm not
Yeah.
aware of any buried there. But then again, that's, you know, it's very hard to focus down on one individual when you think of the thousands, tens of thousands of individuals in history. We kind of need a bit more like time to research and remember.
Give us a date. Give us a date.
Yeah, and even then, you won't get everything that happened on that date.
Yeah.
You know, what happened on Tuesday the 6th, 1318? I have no idea.
King Alfred burnt the cakes.
Right. So there's actually some really, really good comments, and I just want to apologize to anyone's comment that I accidentally skipped over, because there's some really good ones in here that I'm trying to quickly scan through and grab. And also, guys, if you see any comments as well that you want to grab as well, because we've covered the main battle itself now, and we've covered what happened to Edward the Bruce after the battle. While Owen and Mihal are looking for a comment there to dissect and go through, and make sure you guys chuck in your comments as well when it comes down to both. No, you have to remember, we don't specialize. I know some Scottish historian is in the comment section saying we talk total nonsense, which, to be fair, Scotland itself is not our field of expertise. It's actually the Irish side of things that is our field of expertise, in fairness. And on top of that as well, it is what we're talking about today in the comment section. Sorry, in this live stream today is the Bruce in Ireland. We're not actually focused on the Scottish War of Independence. However, if you do have a question on the Scottish War of Independence, we'll try to answer it to our best of our ability. But you have to remember, our main focus today is the Bruce in Ireland, not the Bruce in Scotland. While Owen and Mihal are just picking out a question there, I just want to focus on what happened to John de Birmingham after the battle in 1318. It's quite funny because John de Birmingham is actually a quite interesting character. At this point, John de Birmingham is more of a kind of Irishman than he is an Englishman. You probably often hear of the case of more Irish than the Irish themselves. And during this battle, he does use his Irish kerns made up of O'Reillys and MacMahons to pin down the Bruce's forces. And he was actually really, really close buddy with the O'Reillys and the MacMahons, to the annoyance of the English colonists and many Anglo-Irish. He would often, during the summer months, go up with the kerns up into the borderlands to actually go drinking with them. He was notorious to spend long hours going off to Irish assemblies. He was known to notorious for going off to cattle raiders' camps to go drinking, hang around with them, have a laugh, have a banter with the Gaelic Irish people. And to the English, especially the English colonists, this really annoyed them, and over time would continuously build up until eventually there was an incident around 1328 where a member of the, I think it was a member of the Clinton family, the Clinton Louth branch of the Clintons over in England. One of them are actually killed, from my understanding, which ended up causing a massive riot and a massacre in Ireland at the time, where John de Birmingham himself was actually killed. Then John Clinton of Louth writes a letter over to the English king. It's also very important to note that John Clinton of Louth had high connections in England at the time, because of the English branch of the Clintons supporting him and took his side. But allegedly, according to Clinton's interpretation, Clinton of Louth's interpretation, according to them, it was John de Birmingham who came down to them drunk and aggressive and eventually caused the massacre, because he was looking to try to butcher and kill them himself. It ends up causing a riot where the English colonists and the Anglo-Irish ends up killing John de Birmingham, and then would go on to kill many of the other half of the Anglo-Irish and many of the Gaelic as well. I think in total 160 people were killed during the riot and what eventually became the massacre. However, other evidence had highlighted after the incident that in fact it was John de Birmingham had gone down to negotiate with the likes of John Clinton and basically explain the situation and then give compensation to them. However, to the English colonists, it wasn't good enough, and they ended up killing John de Birmingham, eventually going off then and killing other Anglo-Irish people and Gaelic people as well. So just a very funny thing about John de Birmingham, who was the leader of the Anglo-Irish against the Bruce forces at the time. Anything else you guys want to point out, or is there anything in the comment section you guys want to highlight?
Maguire he's talking about, he's being a bit rude, is actually Rory Maguire from 1641 fame. Like he burnt a few castles, including in Fermanagh, but I don't know where he's buried.
No, see, I think he's on about Owen Roe O'Neill, who died at Loch Hocker.
Yeah,
but I don't know of a Rory O'Connor. I know, like I say, Owen Roe, but I don't know of and the island castle of Loch Hocker. But
yeah, because Rory Maguire was involved at the beginning of 1641. He was killed in Leitrim. It could be that in part of Fermanagh or part of Cavan there is a tradition, which is not a well-known tradition, that he's buried there. There are Maguires buried in Fermanagh. Fermanagh, especially Loch Earn, it was full of islands. You have Enniskillen was an island, and there were several other ones. So there would be several Maguires buried there. But the only famous Rory Maguire was from 1641. And yes, Owen Roe O'Neill was buried he died in Loch Uchtard or whatever, however you pronounce it, in Cavan, where there's a very interesting castle.
Yeah, he was the only one I can think of who was buried. His comment there, not buried, but he died on, like say, Loch Hocker. I don't know if that's how I pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. So Kat was saying the English, or something about the English being mad that William Wallace had relations with the Queen. How unlikely was that? 100 to 1? More like 1 billion to 1, since the Queen you're referring to was, I think, a small child, like anywhere between 4 and 8, during the Scottish War of Independence. And obviously was nowhere near Scotland at that time. So, I think more like 1 billion to 1 rather than 100 to 1. For that one. Someone, Kevan also was asking about, or mentioned about Edward and Robert Bruce's 2 younger brothers who died in 1307. They, for some reason, they turn up in Galloway in 1307 with a force of 700 Irishmen. Them and what's the other guy? Nick Crawford. And they are attacked by the MacDougals and captured and then executed in Carlisle. And then Robert, then about, I think is it like 10 years later maybe? A year later, sorry, he goes back and obviously exacts revenge on the MacDougals for doing that. So
I'm going to ban Euro N because he's annoying the shit out of me. What the hell has any of his stupid comments got to do with what was it called? The Bruce's invasion of Ireland. You're literally coming on this to try to make a fool out of the 3 of us when we're supposed to have a conversation on, what was it, the Bruce's invasion of Ireland. Get out of the comment section, will you fucking gobshite, yeah. Like, honest to God, like, come in there being as cheeky as possible to us. Your man in the bloody castle in his cheeky comments, like, honest to God. Are we qualified? Right, first and foremost, we are qualified as Irish historians, but does that mean we know everything in the Great great detail. As Mihal had pointed out early on, do we know everything that happened in a day? No, we don't. So I don't. No, honest to God, we're human beings. You're talking to. Have a bit of bloody respect to us. For God's sake, like. Coming into the comment section being as cheeky as possible. Get out of it, like. Why is it that everybody else in the comment section is completely respectful to us, is able to have a normal, decent conversation and treat us like human beings? And we have that one gobshite who goes, "Oh, I know a fact about a castle that's in the corner of Ireland." I don't care. Honestly, God, that's great for you. And if you want to talk to us about the corner, a fun fact about the corner of a castle in Ireland, we're that's what we're here for, to have a nice conversation. But could you talk to us like we're bloody human beings? That's great. Thank you, guys. By the way, I just want to thank everybody else that in the comment section, everybody else that's actually talking to us as human beings. Thanks very much, guys.
So I want the title of this video to be "Watch Philip Have a Crash Out."
I think it's well worded every once in a while, just to remind people that, yeah, you're talking to human beings here. Jesus Christ. And it doesn't take much to talk to us as human beings. Jesus Christ, like, have some respect for the two lads, like, Every once in a while, you just need to remind people that you are talking to human beings here. Like.
I would never speak to any of you like that. So if you just want to come across to my channel, I'm
But once again, I just want to remind everybody, thank you everyone else who talks to us as human beings. I was looking at I was there working away, and I was listening to Owen politely talk to him. And I was reading the comments, and I thought that comment was insanely disrespectful, to be honest with you. No problems kicking him out there. Get out. Jesus Christ, like. Unless you're able to talk to us as a human being, like, Jesus
He actually got good at the end. He said, "Thank you to me for giving the right information." It was Rory Maguire, and then he asked a sensible question that I was about to answer. About Devonish Island, where I've never been, but I would love to go.
Yeah. Well, I don't really care anymore. If you're going to open up pure cheeky like that, you can get out, like, Jesus
It's
Christ.
funny. It's funny if you go to Fermanagh and you go on lake boat tours along it. A lot of the lakes are far bigger now than they were during, the times of Rory Maguire. It was the 18th century, I believe it was 19th century. The building of the dam in Ballyshannon, and they used that to flood the Fermanagh with. The lakes were wider, and they used the dam to shrink the lakes for farming land. So the islands and stuff like that would have been more numerous and smaller at the time of Rory O'Connor and stuff. So a lot of it's underground now. No, a lot of it's. I'm getting all confused. There's just more land than there was back then. It was more lakey in Fermanagh back then.
Yeah. Kira asked a question about Bothwell and the Queen. I presume that Queen she means is Mary Queen of Scots, I think. Though I'm not sure. And my daughter is beside me, so I don't want to read out the question. Because she won't go to bed.
Right.
It's a thing about Scottish history. I vaguely know. I can't answer that. And then earlier, someone asked about the wood used for javelins. It's an interesting question. I have a feeling it would have been whatever wood was handy.
The person who would know that is actually Colin in University College of Cork. We do actually have to bring him on to the show when he's next free. He's still doing a whole load of work with University College of Cork, but he actually specializes in both, because there was another brilliant question as well on slings during.
I think it was the same. I think it was the same guy, Rex the Golden Doodle.
Yeah.
What kind of wood was used on the shaft of javelins? I'm finding hazel was used for craft work like fish traps, and oak for long ships. So
it's definitely in the field of expertise of Colin, who's down in University College of Cork. I'd bring him onto the show, and he can cover all those kind of questions, because those once you start asking questions like that, that's where you go into the nitty gritty of all this kind of stuff. and that would be Colin's field of expertise down in University College of Cork. I've tried to get him onto the show a few times, but yeah, he does. He's quite busy. He's always gotten something to do, especially when you specialize in that sort of field, for sure.
What Kira just asked, what about travel in those times? Was water travel the highways of the times? In part, yes, in part, no. Between Scotland and Ireland, there was, the galleys, which went fairly fast. In some parts of Ireland, like Lough Erne, we mentioned, Fermanagh, there were a lot of galleys used. There weren't many built. There weren't many like roads with stone roads, but there were regular roads running from Dublin up to Armagh, then to go, probably to Galway. There were a lot of paths, so people would have walked or gone on horseback. Carriages would have been a bit more difficult.
I think most of the time they were traveling by boat as well. Boat was very, very quick for the Irish, especially after the the Hiberno-Scandinavians had brought in more longships around the place. Because I know up around our area, Owen, especially going up around Mallow and stuff, on purpose, wasn't it the Desmond Fitzgeralds were constantly looking for what was it called? The English to send them money to go build bridges and stuff. And instead of building bridges, they kept the trade coming from the river up around bloody hell, what was the name of it again? That port. Not Cork, but just east of Cork. Yes, Youghal. The trade going from Youghal up to Mallow. And instead of just using the roads and stuff, they would just use the boats to bring from Youghal up the river and over to Mallow, instead of relying on what he did instead with the money from Mallow Bridge is he would just pocket it, and anytime people needed to cross through, they would just use a boat to get through that whole area and stuff. So yeah, I do know on purpose, especially in the Desmond Fitzgerald territories and stuff, they were just using boats rather than using roads and stuff in that period. And boats were just much more quicker, especially after the Viking Age.
And then we have quite a lot of boating families, traditional boating families, the O'Driscolls, the O'Malleys, the Falveys are recruited by the McCarthys. So yeah, I mean, and trading with Spain, France. So it's not like we're this little backward, non-seaboarding nation. We took it on very quickly.
Like the O'Malleys and the O'Flahertys regularly went down the coast and like into the Shannon Estuary. That's why O'Connor Carey, he built Carrigafoyle Castle there. And they would bring Gallowglass or soldiers, mercenaries from Scotland down there, land them Carrigafoyle or maybe Glynn, and then they're straight into like the Fitzmaurice territories or the Desmond territories. And you could there would be trade coming that way as well.
Yeah, the O'Flahertys and the Mackie Breens were constantly fighting over the islands, Inish, what you call it, with Fort Angusers, that fort on the islands just in Clare, just up north of Clare.
The Aran Island.
The Aran Islands, thank you. I don't know why that wouldn't come into my head up in there. But the O'Flahertys and the Mackie Breens are constantly fighting over that as well. So, we have records of O'Brien's being for a very short time, matter of months, being in the Isle of Man as well. So, you can we're well established in sea trade. As I always say, Fitzpatrick can attest to that. As we went across and robbed him and brought him back.
Right. Another question as well. Are the Irish different people from the Celts? Now, whoa, that's a can of worms.
We've got 7 minutes.
I take it. I'll actually make this as simple as possible, because I take it that you're just looking to cover an essay for school. If not, I can easily expand depending on what your topic is and stuff. This obviously is outside of the field of expertise for the Bruce's invasion of Ireland, but what Celtic is, in a very simplified way, is basically a culture that existed around 300 BC to around 80 BC. Now, obviously it's very, very complicated, but when most people are talking about Celtic, they're talking about that Latin culture that comes over from the mainland Europe and into Ireland. Now, even on top of that, I can already see Dr. Owen O'Neill's brain going, Jesus Christ, that's way too simplified. Because on top of that as well, the Irish take on their own form of insular Latin culture. And then even on top of that, trying to find insular Latin finds in Ireland from an archaeologist perspective is quite difficult at times. When most people are also talking about Celtic culture, it's also, especially going into the early medieval period, is trying to find the similarities between Welsh literature and also Irish literature as well. So when people are talking about Celtic culture or Celts in general, they're mostly talking about the culture. They're not talking about ethnic groups. The closest thing you can come to ethnic groups is the connection between the Iberian Peninsula, the northern part of the Iberian Peninsula, and the Ireland as well, which is the Iberian Celtic people, allegedly. And even on top of that, DNA-wise, God is starting a whole load of arguments these days. And that's why historians, by the way, are so reluctant to use the word Celtic. You're better off using the word Gaelic and looking at the connection between Ireland and Scotland, especially if you're talking about the Bruce's invasion of Ireland, which is the topic we're covering today. When it comes down to a simplified school interpretation, I would keep to the very basics of what is Celtic culture, and then similarities between 300 BC to about 90 AD, and the similarities between Ireland and the European connection that's there, and also between Ireland and Britain between that period of 300 BC to 90 AD, and what is Celtic culture in that era is definitely what I would, keep it down to simplify it, which in itself can be quite difficult, especially linguistic wise, and also archaeological finds, especially archaeological finds, can be quite difficult in that. I don't think there's anything else to put in there, especially from the perspective of an easy school essay.
You could just mention the language. Irish is regarded as being in the Celtic family of languages, sort of whatever that means. It's a handy label. It goes back to Indo-European, and it's a family of Indo-European languages.
Yeah.
The ones that exist now are all insular Celtic. Ireland, Irish, Scots-Irish, Manx, and then the other branches, Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. I think there was a Gaulish as well, but that's long gone.
Yeah, for sure. And also on top of that as well, inside of your essay, because most teachers, especially secondary school teachers, are very cheeky about this, make sure to put in a counter argument of why there is no evidence of a Celtic invasion of Ireland in around 300 BC, because I know there's a lot of secondary school teachers that believe in the myth that there was some kind of Celtic invasion in 300 BC. So make sure to put that in there, that it is a myth, and look up online why there is no evidence whatsoever, just to cover your ass, because I know a lot of secondary school teachers that believe in this silly little myth that there was some kind of Celtic invasion around 300 BC, which has its origins in Victorian mythology, because the Victorians made up a whole load of shite, basically. And a part of that was this whole mythology that there was some kind of Celtic invasion in 300 BC, which never happened. And every once in a while, I see that popping up. And even inside of schools and stuff, it's like, oh, my school teacher, he's in middle school, taught me that there was an invasion in 300 BC. And it's like, where's the evidence of this? Oh, the Victorians. All right, well, there you go. Nothing else I need to advance on that. I don't think so. just popping in as well. Did you guys cover that one as well? The Irish modified the Norse longship by adding a keel, making it easier to maneuver. I actually didn't know that slight detail, which makes sense, to be honest with you. I think when I was reading some information and stuff, it kind of indicated to that, but I didn't actually know that specifically. Anything else you guys want to cover or answer? I'll just quickly go through some of this stuff as well. Philip Maguire, King of Fermanagh, during the late 14th century, launched a river raid using his Irish gallows on the O'Reilly in Cavenant. You can go to Inniskilling in Limerick on boat, which is also very, very true. Like, the thing is, people have to remember, especially even in Asia and stuff, it was actually way quicker to move by boat, which is also very, very interesting as well, because if you go to Cambodia, which is actually in the middle of a golden age in this specific era of the 14th century, they have actually constructed an entire, what they were historians referred to as an ultra city, which even today in Cambodia, their city is actually bigger than what Los Angeles and London is today. And it was actually all the roads that they had were actually rivers, and they were actually using boats to quickly fly around the place, which is absolutely magnificent.
Like Tenochtitlan in Mexico.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, but I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to say the name. I was just going to say where Mexico City is now, the Aztec capital.
Yeah, I think it's Tenochtitlan, but that's probably any Mexicans in the lobby may just start going a bit mad.
Caveman is making a good point. I know the river systems well. My family are islanders in Lough Erne. So when I go up to Fermanagh, Caveman, I want a tour. I want a tour by boat.
He offered, I think, someone offered earlier. Yeah, I mean, I've done the tour of the locks of Fermanagh. It's well worth it. Would highly recommend if anyone's thinking of something to do in Fermanagh. There's not a lot to do in Fermanagh. I wouldn't recommend moving there. But Inniskilling Castle is beautiful. Great military museum, and the locks are definitely worth a visit.
Hi, Lynn. Nice to see you here. Another of my followers. There's a question for you, Micheál, about the Tiernans.
It's very. There's a couple of Tiernans. There's the McTiernans, there's the O'Tiernans. There's a few of them that they're scattered around. The name can be found in Ulster, Meath. I don't want to say Leinster because I think that's the McTighes, and I'm getting them mixed up. Send me a message on it, and I'll get back to you, because I think after 2 hours of talking of Edward the Bruce, my brain's a bit frazzled. So, but I definitely think there's a branch in Ulster and there's a branch in Meath, Roscommon area. So I'll give you the history of them.
Happy days. Yeah, that actually reminds me, myself and Micheál have to organise what's it called, a time for covering into more detailed clans and stuff as well. But you're already doing all your live streams as well over on your channel. Are you doing that tomorrow? What's the crack? Were you going into more detail about the families and clans of Ireland and Scotland?
Tomorrow is my members only live, and it's the Norman invasion of Munster. So I'm sure Owen would love to see the notes on that, just to go over it as requested by my members and paying subscribers. So that was the request. So.
And also, while I have you there, just before we finish up and stuff, do you want to quickly go through? Your brain is trying to scramble this back on again. Just quickly turning on the engine again. Because to be fair, now you've gone through your 2 hour points, so it's time to start tidying up and wrapping away. So your brain, I can see your brain was slightly putting away the information back into its folders and boxes again. But just while you're here, because obviously, if you don't go into great detail, just remember Micheál actually has a video over on his channel, his YouTube channel, that covers the Battle of Dyce O'Dea that actually happened in the same year. And then we were talking about earlier as well, is that this did give breathing space to the Bruce's military forces in Ireland. It was supposed to. Sure, Edward the Bruce got himself killed. But if Edward the Bruce had waited long enough, he may have gotten support from the likes of the McCarthy's and O'Briens, because the McCarthy's and O'Briens had actually, well, especially the O'Briens, had gone off and won the Battle of Dysa O'Dea, which may have allowed later on then the movement of the McCarthy's and O'Briens to be able to move up and support Edward the Bruce. But of course, Edward the Bruce had gotten himself killed. Can you expand on the battle itself, Michal, and talk about the Battle of Dysa O'Dea, or at least talk about the families that were in the Battle of Dysa O'Dea?
Well, I'll just break it down. So the battle is basically a conflict within, but not part of, the Edward Bruce invasion of Ireland. So it's the declares. It actually goes back a lot further than the 14th century. It goes back to like 1275, 1276, when Edward I grants the declares Thomond or County Clare, but on the pretense that the declares actually have to take it over. So if they take it, they own it. So they start a long campaign of trying to take County Clare from the O'Briens. Now, you fast forward to the 14th century, you have two factions now. So the De Burghs are supporting one faction, and they Murtagh O'Brien's faction, because they don't want the declares to get County Clare, because then they're right on the De Burghs lands there, and they're just trying to cut off some of the power that the declares are going to get. But and the declares have a faction, Donogh O'Brien, who descend from Brian Rua, which is one of the main branches of the O'Briens. They are supporting that faction because in doing so, they have a puppet state under Donogh's rule. So they would still influence and be able to dictate how County Clare is governed and effectively rule it. Donogh is forced to flee north to the O'Neills, and that's where he invites Edward Bruce across for military support. And with this, the declares decide to attack Murtagh, because obviously he's pushed out their puppet. And they march into Clare, and what happens is the Murtagh goes out to meet them, and the two armies have a bit of trouble finding each other on where they are. And the declares end up on the O'Deas or O'Day's castle, or just outside of it, and the O'Deas march out to meet them. A small force, I can't remember how many now, but it's a small force compared to the declare forces. And after a long, hard fight, they're completely surrounded. It looks like it's about to come to an end. But the Murtagh O'Brien sort of comes and finds stragglers, because he's looking for declare's forces. He finds all these wounded people making their way back away from the battlefield, and is able to rally his army to smash declare from behind, and they win the battle. As for all the families that are involved, the video does name all the families that are traditionally found in the area. There's no contemporary sources that state who did or did not fight, bar the leaders of the forces. But you can sort of get an idea from families that are living within or are vassals of these lords, of who might have been involved in the battle. So I would say check out the video if you want to see, if you've got family connections in County Clare or Limerick, County Limerick, maybe to check it out.
Happy days. Right, 1 second there. And
thanks to Caveman, he's offering to bring us round for Fermanagh.
Nice. That's always the main thing.
I'll be up there in the morning.
The camera and everything set up. Yeah. Right, guys, this is our YouTube today.
But thank you very much, Caveman. And I'm sure you're a good stonemason. But one day I'll be up in Fermanagh.
Well, let me know when you're coming up to Ulster, and I'll meet you.
Happy days.
Yeah.
what was my bloody point as well? The Gaelic Resurgence. I'm just going to quickly scan through my point here. Oh, yeah. So anyway, regardless, I think I was talking about the fact, the reason why I chucked this one in here as well is the fact that because of the Battle of Dysa O'Dea, although we weren't able to link up with Edward the Bruce's forces, it did cause a chain of events which eventually led to the rise of Archmacmur Covenant, who by 1370 was able to go into Dublin and take the Black Rent from Dublin, the tribute from Dublin, which then eventually led to Richard III invading Ireland, and then eventually in around 1399 being defeated by Archmacmur's forces in the Wicklow Mountains, which eventually led to Richard II, massively important, led to the defeat of Richard II in the Wicklow Mountains, and then his complete withdrawal over to England, which led to the collapse of the lordship of, well, not the complete collapse, as Henry VII would point out in around after the Wars of the Roses at the end of the 15th century. He would point out that basically at that point, once Richard II had pulled out, the Lordship of Ireland was pretty much collapsed at that point, and it was pretty much brought down to the Pale. It was basically a Pale of its, a shadow of its former self at that point onwards. So the Battle of Dysa O'Dea, very, very important to bring up those opportunities later on. So it's not a complete disaster for us, for sure, in my opinion. Anything else you guys want to expand on top of that, or anything in the comment section you guys want to point out as well?
No, I think just maybe decide what we're doing next week.
Yeah, happy days.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it for myself. Obviously, we did expand on last week basically about the mini little Cold War and stuff. Not Cold War, sorry, the Ice Age that kicked off in Ireland, and the famine and the resources that have been burnt. Ireland at this stage completely, especially as the Bruce goes back over and there's a complete withdrawal back over to Scotland. Ireland is left completely in tatters at this point. Famine, in a complete little mini ice age. Things are absolutely dire. But at least we won that battle that is Dysa O'Dea that led to the Gaelic Resurgence. So we still have that. It's still at least a good bit of thing to point out. What is the other thing I need to point out as well? Scotland at this point, eventually, Robert the Bruce, Edward Bruce is dead. Robert the Bruce, after years of pointing, slowly but surely, zapping at the resources of England, eventually around 1328 gets recognised as King of Scotland by the English, and the English eventually get into a ceasefire between the two of them, until eventually then you have the Second Scottish War of Independence, and which leads into the 100 Years' War, which goes on for hundreds of years with the rise of Edward III. And then on top of that as well, over on the English side of things, sorry, we're running out of time there, so I can't really go into details about this little slide here, but basically what you need to know is what Owen O'Neill had pointed out earlier, is that Edward II is trying to navigate his way through, trying to avoid civil wars in England, which eventually leads to Edward II going into the ceasefire, and then eventually, ultimately leading to Edward II being executed by his own people, which is very important. That not only is Ireland trying to avoid and also going through civil wars, Scotland is doing the same, and so is England as well, because it's the medieval period. That's what people seem to do at the point in this period, is go from one civil war to the next. Okay, I think that's pretty much us when it comes down to everything we need to cover today. We'll just finish up and wrap up there. If there's any other comments or anything you guys want to go on through. Mihal, thank you so much for covering all the stuff that you covered today and going into details when it comes down to the Battle of Dysa O'Dea. We kind of started running out of time there, so you had to quickly run through all that kind of stuff. You were saying about your live stream tomorrow. How do we go onto this live stream? How do we join your membership and stuff?
just head to the channel, click the membership buttons. You can be the lowest form. It's like 99p. I don't charge all. Or you can be a super, sugar daddy and give me $12.99 or whatever in my house. I don't mind. I don't mind at all. But you all come along and take part in the lives. I tend to do whatever people ask or in the lives. So if you've got a family history you want to do, I'll do it. Sometimes you get lovely in-depth ones, and other times if the families aren't well recorded, unfortunately you get just a tidbit of information. But I will always try and find research for you, so come along. And apart from that, if you want to support the channel, just like, watch videos, subscribe, and keep your ears to the ground for an upcoming project that I've been working on. So
it is for sure. And Owen O'Neill, how do we support your channel as well and all the research that you do on your side?
Watch my videos. I will hopefully over the weekend. I'll have one coming out about Elizabeth I and Ireland, especially the 9 Years' War. It may turn into a series because I've been writing it and it's getting very long. Then once a week I'm doing a live questions and answers about Irish history, either Tuesday or Thursday, depending. Next week will be on a Thursday. And then if you can subscribe, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. So if you want to support, send a few coffees my way, that would be fine. That would be very welcome. And just keep watching the videos, spread the news, etc.
For sure.
That would be great.
And thanks very much, guys, for all the support as well on my side as well. Absolutely means so much for me. You guys are obviously pushing me over the edge to try to hit that 30K as well, which means so much to me. And it's the same thing over on my Instagram as well. My Instagram is booming like there's no tomorrow. TikTok is, although you guys are actually fully supporting me on TikTok, Jesus, the TikTok algorithm, God, it's wildly against me. But somehow you guys, because you actually enjoy my content as well, is literally pushing me through this wild algorithm that's going against me on TikTok. So I really, really do appreciate that, guys, all the support that you're giving my channels as well. And on top of that, guys, if you want to support me financially, definitely jump over to my Patreon. Whatever money you have is absolutely worth the world to me. And also on top of that, guys, as well, I do classes on Irish medieval history every Sunday night if you're living in Europe and also America, also England as well, of course. And also if you're in Asia, those classes are on a Monday morning. So definitely jump on top of that. That's 20 quid a month, which is definitely worth it since I cover classes once a week for about 2 hours. This week, we are covering the topic that is King John in Ireland. So this week, we are covering the topic on King John in Ireland because you guys keep asking me about that as well. So other than that, guys, thank you so much. And as always, slán go bhfuil.
Slán.